All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Normie Recertification Training. Today is October 8th, 2024. I want to welcome everybody to the room. For those of you that are here with us, just about every training that we do, you'll notice we did a little bit of a different start today. We didn't have a countdown clock. We just brought our guests right into the room so we could get started right on time. So I want to welcome Gavin. You all know Dr. Gavin and Mason. And I'm going to let these guys talk about themselves in a moment, but a little bit of housekeeping I want to take care of here first. And Doug, I don't know if you had any announcements you wanted to start off with.
Well, I suspect that Tim will probably announce the classes that are coming up, but we did get Best Living Systems moved into its new location. We're shipping out, which is really great, and the new affiliate program is up and running. So if you're interested in air purification, air filtration, testing, remediation products, we're rocking, ready to go.
Thank you, Doug. And I wanted to start off with these announcements first to get this all out of the way because there's a very serious situation going on, which we're going to be talking about. And I don't want to go to announcements after all of that. So we're just going to get that out of the way now. So Tim, you want to let us know what's going on with some classes?
Yeah, we've got several classes coming up here for the fourth quarter, beginning in a couple of weeks in Covington, Louisiana. We've got the NCRSI NCMP class on the 23rd through the 25th. This is an advanced remediation class, specifically for those who are dealing with sensitized individuals. Really, really important class because, as we know, that the population is growing. And you know somebody who's probably sensitized. So if you're looking to expand your business, looking to be able to help those who have difficulty finding help, this is the class for you. Also, if you are looking to become a Normie Pro, if you want the Normie Pro designation, this is a class you want to take. The 23rd through the 25th in Covington, Louisiana. We've got a couple of CMA, CMR classes coming up here in the near future, the 6th through the 8th of November in Covington, Louisiana, CMA, CMR basic certification class and basic licensing class for the state of Florida, state of Louisiana, Washington, D.C., covers most of the states except New York and Texas, and certainly a nationwide certification for those states that don't offer licensing. That's in Covington, the 6th through the 8th of November, and then we have one in Florida in the Tampa area. We were going to have it at the Bilmar Beach Resort, but of course, because of Hurricane Helene, they are experiencing some pretty incredible difficulties. I haven't heard back from them yet as to whether they plan on being ready by then. But if not, we will have another location announced when that is up. And that is in December the 10th through the 12th, December 10th through 12th. So look for those classes on your calendar, training.normie.org or besttrainingschool.com.
Lance, could I make a comment about that if you don't mind?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think one of the things that people have always asked is about these hurricanes. The state of Florida does not and has not traditionally suspended their licensing law, which means those guys that are in the field that are doing assessments and remediation projects, water mitigation projects, need to be licensed by the state. And that's one of the reasons why we're having this class here at Covington and then another one in Florida the first week in December. So if you guys have any interest at all in working in the state of Florida, disaster recovery in terms of dealing with mold remediation or water mitigation, you need to be licensed. We can show you how to do that in 3 days. And one of the cool things about this is that once you make application to the state, you're considered licensed. So even if it takes them 3 to 6 weeks to actually get you a license, they know that's on them. And their delay is not your issue and it's not the client's issue. So it's really important if you plan on doing any work in the Florida area as a result of the hurricane that you get licensed.
Doug, so when you run a course December 10th and 12th, that must include a Normie mandatory Christmas party. Is that correct?
It does. How did you get?
I might come to that training.
And someplace great to eat, maybe even char-grilled oysters there.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to be at the hotel on the beach. It's one of my favorite places to be. Unfortunately, they took a lot of damage and they're right in the line of fire again. So let's hope that they fare this pretty well. We've been at that hotel through a hurricane. and it was, I think, a Cat 1 when we were there.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was, we were surrounded by water. It was, it was intense to go through that at a Cat 1. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this. Hopefully,
But we had a very nice room.
yes, I'm still not sure why we were up on the top floor in a room surrounded by glass during a Cat 1 hurricane, but yes,
It worked
was,
out.
yeah, it was a good place to be. All right, I want to get going with this. We're making a little light of this, but it's a really serious situation that we're dealing with right now. Helene just went through tremendous amount of damage. The cleanup effort alone from Helene with piling all the debris out in the streets to be cleaned up is creating another hazard that really wasn't foreseen with a hurricane coming in right behind it. We're talking about projectiles of refrigerators, if you want to call it that, TVs, whatever else is thrown out there. So if you're in any of these areas, keep that in mind, that, all the stuff piled out in front of your house now could become something that causes a lot of damage. If you think about it, when a storm's coming, you're out there bringing your chairs in and trying to secure everything in your yards, and now you've piled all this debris, sharp edges, lumber, and everything else. So be cautious of that. All right, we have two guests in the room. Two completely different, I guess, verticals that they work in. And Mason, I want to start with you because I've met you at the experience. I've talked with your daughter quite a bit. We actually taught some classes together, but I've never really talked a lot in detail with you. So could you tell us a little bit about you, who you are, what you do? Because the way that Becky was describing it to me is very interesting, the model that you follow.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. So I've been in the business a long time. Barry Costa was my first instructor in '94. It was March. So I've been in the industry a long time. My IICRC number is 22,000 or something. So you kind of go back with that. But long story short, I'm excited to be here today. And what you brought up a second ago with all the debris in the street and all that happening, that also brings another one for us first responders to go in there and extract and do work. It's going to be really ugly. I just got back from the Carolinas and I had 2 nails in my tires and everything. And I'm leaving tonight to go to Tampa. So I totally get what you're talking about. And I agree with you. I'm glad you brought that up. My background's kind of interesting. I was known, I was a very successful carpet cleaning business that I got into restoration. I worked at a church and guy came to do a flood and he made more money than I did in 2 weeks. So I'm like, hey, I'm going to start restoration. And we had El Nino that year. And during that year, I was sucking up a rescue boat in the house and the rescue boat. And I was on Channel 7 ABC News and I'm waving. And my wife called me on my brick cell phone, say, hey, don't be so happy. But there is different sides. It's really sad. Those storm drains weren't ready in California. They weren't ready and all the debris was there. So a lot of streets and houses flooded. So what I kind of went into is after I started doing the carpet cleaning and the restoration, I got into Aramco and John Don, and I ended up being their #1 truck mount salesman, selling hundreds of truck mounts every year. And I built a network called Mason's Network, and now there's 9,000 members, and it's so big that I found a way to get everyone work. So when anyone, the Norming Pro members need 20, 40 truck mounts out there, I can be there. We've had up to 87 truck mounts. I just did in Dallas. And we extracted 340,000 square feet in 7 hours. So I think it was 82 truck mounts. But so I'm really unique because I bring everyone together and we're able to really learn and get more the aspects. And we are completely different, Dr. Gavin and I. Dr. Gavin's more of the details and the fine and all that, which I love. I really learn from him every time I talk to him. But my side's more of the boots on the ground. Let's get the water out. Dr. Gavin's the long term. What are the microbials and the mold and all that? What can we do? Because that's a big problem. People think, hey, the water's out, the problem's gone, which it's not. But we're the first ones on the ground to clean out stuff and do stuff like that.
In the past, I've done interviews with David DeGroff, who I understand that you know. And from my understanding of what you've described to what you do, you're kind of like the next level above that technology-wise, where he provides manpower as just manpower. You're bringing in manpower, I guess, including him too, and the technology side?
Yeah, I'm more on the technology side because he's actually one of the labor companies we use. I'm more on the I do more. I have a map, and I can tell where everyone is and how much equipment there is. And in Alaska, I was at a restoration job after a tsunami came up there in 20 minutes. So I could cover I've covered everywhere but Hawaii so far. But I get a pretty good span because there's just a huge network of good guys, and they're able to do better and start learning about how to get certified and stuff. Like I just was watching your show last night, and I'm excited about you guys open up that education center in California, Anaheim, right? Yeah,
Yes.
I can't wait. I want to be one of the first students. So unless you've already had students, so I'll be the third. But anyway, so I'm more on the technical. So we've gone to QVC, Amazon, all these big buildings, and we could be there. We've done 1.1 million square feet extraction, and there were 72 truck mounts there, and I think it was like 54 different companies.
Well, when I talked to Becky, your daughter earlier, I kind of got a vision in my head because I had an idea what you do, but I wanted to hear you explain it. And we were talking about the Environmental Task Force. And we work with David DeGrom and his manpower also. If we need to pull manpower any place in the country, he can do that. It sounds like you would be the next piece that would be a perfect fit to work with us. And that's what we need to talk about after this. But I just wanted to put that out there so it's in both of our minds.
Yeah.
I want to get to Gavin in a minute, but I do want to hear a little bit about what you've seen working on the ground because of the previous hurricane that just went through.
Yeah, so I'm really unique. I'm normally on the ground. Like right now, I'm heading out right after this call, and my laundry's done. I'm out. I just got back. I drove 17 hours from Asheville and North Carolina, Boone, North Carolina, Augusta. No one's talking about Augusta, but Augusta got hit really bad. They're going to lose power until the 12th. Half the city has power now. But so what I've seen boots on the ground, this is what I've seen when I go out there. Of course, you have roads you can't get there. There's people stranded. There's so many cars on the side of the road because all the debris and the nails. Then you also see cities and cities without lights. So that means those cities don't have pumps. If they do have pumps, you have to pay cash. There's just a whole different world that we live in that wasn't the same, right? Like I'm a door knocking fool. Well, you don't door knock anymore. Now you have pay-per-clicks, internet, Google, Zoom meetings. I remember when they came out with a fax machine, I was like, that's amazing, I guess
that's also assuming you have internet and power, which you don't.
You nailed it. So I went up to Asheville, and for 3-hour drive in, I had no internet, no power. Even my map on my phone did not work. Then when I came back 3 hours later, my phone started going nuts, like when you get off a plane. Ding, 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 ding. You bring up a great one. That's where Starlink would help. I had tried to buy a Starlink and couldn't even get one right now. Local stores, you could probably get it on Amazon, but where was I going to be? Another issue is hotels. All the hotels are taken. So you have to drive 2.5, 3 hours to get a hotel. And if you're lucky, it's not $1,000 a night, it goes on, and people don't think about the basics. Here, people are stranded in the hills without food and water. I tell you, Asheville is a great example. We boarded up some buildings. The only looting that I saw was a Dollar General store, and they looted for food. They didn't loot for TV. They didn't loot for anything else. They were stranded in the hill. No one could get in or out. And your heart breaks for those people, I mean, materialistic means nothing to me. I mean, I've been married for 34 years. I have 3 wonderful kids. I have chickens and ducks and the goat. I've been very blessed there, but there's no value on them. I can rebuild. I want them. So the missing people up there are so sad, and the devastation. In Clearwater, we had crews trying to go over the bridge, and my crew was turned away because the police officer said, you can't come in until we get a body count. So we couldn't even get over the bridge to start extracting the hotels and all that and I couldn't believe the police officer said those words. But it was, and you think about, there's more than just what we're thinking. We have internet, right? We have phones. There's homeless people that don't know what's going on. And even if they did, they might mentally not. That's probably why they're homeless, right? There's so much going on in the world. You're homeless for many reasons, right? Addictions and mental and financial, everything. But maybe maybe there was a homeless count. It's just your heart breaks for all these people and the family members. It's devastation.
You know, back in May, just before hurricane season, we do a training just before June 1st. And now actually I hear they're thinking of moving hurricane season back to May 15th, but that's another decision they have to make.
Lance.
But we talk about things like this coming up. And we've gone through this several times throughout the summer, warning about people going into these areas becoming more of a burden on the area than help because they don't know what they're doing. Doug, you had a comment? I think I cut you off.
I did. Thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but what Mason said was really, really powerful to me because I think what he said about these outlying areas that you don't even think about much, Augusta, for instance. I remember when Katrina hit, we were here in New Orleans at the time that it hit. It took us 2.5 hours to drive north the day after the storm just to be able to find a gas station that was operating. And that was Vicksburg. And I think we forget all of these little towns around where the media has been in the big towns, basically, but all these small towns that nobody knows about, just devastated by this kind of storm. And so I appreciate so much what these guys do, and they realize the magnitude of it.
And you're right, Doug. When I went to New Orleans in 2005 for Hurricane Katrina response, it wasn't until day 11 that I got to Biloxi, and no one had told me about Biloxi.
Right, that's right.
We're all flat out overwhelmed in New Orleans with the floods and the wards and the bank that broke and the medical center we had to deal with, and also the shelter at the arena. And then suddenly said, "Oh no, tomorrow you got to go to Biloxi." What's Biloxi? I couldn't even spell it. We got down to Biloxi, and I had no idea the destruction down there and the isolation of the people. And as Mason correctly said, right now, when we start to see these storms, these big events, connectivity is an issue. If we can't connect, we don't have the skills to get out a paper map and read a paper map anymore. We don't have the skills to communicate without connection. And as Mason said, I'm in an area where I had nothing, had to go back to first principles. And then when I left the area, my phone went crazy. And that's what we're going to find in Florida within about 36 hours.
Well, and truthfully, a map is very difficult if you don't have GPS. I know when we left here, if it had not been for the locals using their chainsaws, I'm not sure we could have found the roads.
Yeah, Doug, when you came up here after Hurricane Sandy came through and we toured the coast, I mean, it was just devastation all over the place. We hit certain areas where they had state police cordoning off the areas that if you didn't have a local address, you weren't going beyond that point.
Right.
So any contractors coming in, they just couldn't do any work. But the point I was trying to get to before was we keep telling our people, we know you want to go do work. We know you want to help. But if you're not invited in, don't go. The resources in those areas cannot support more people coming in just to be there. If you're there, you need to be there working.
I was talking to someone just yesterday about they were heading from California on their way to Florida. And I said, "Where are you going to stay?" And he said, "I don't know, probably in my car." I said, "Probably if you're lucky." So,
well, yeah, we've done this for 10 plus years. We bring a generator and get an Airbnb and power it up. But you're right. I think you said don't come and not invited. That's like looky-loos. Guys, if you come for a mission, a purpose, like a business plan, I mean, there's so much more in everything. But they're coming down just looking, taking up the gas stations, the food, the hotels, the hard workers. In Lake Charles, it was 3 years ago, I believe. In Lake Charles, a hurricane hit the same town 3 times. We had to drive 2.5 hours each time to hotels because all the hotels were torn apart. The first hurricane, I believe, was a Category 4, and it did damage to roofs, but no rain followed. Then right after that, the rainstorm came and no one covered up the roofs in time. So, and we flat tires. I can't tell you how many. I just got, like I told you, 2 nails in my tire right now, driving over branches. Javier was driving in the Carolinas and power lines were down and they were trying to get around power lines. So there is a lot more chainsaws like you're talking about. Don't just come on that. But being a professional, I believe I'm a professional. I rate myself that. We always stay on the weak side of the storm. Well, guess what? That storm moves. And a couple years ago, it was 2 years ago in Baton Rouge, a storm turned and it went right over our hotel. No power, no food. And I never booked the first floor. A few years ago, before that, around 3-4 years ago, I was in Kenner by the airport, and they said they had a generator. Well, the generator only powered up the lights, the emergency lights. So everyone's in their car trying to charge their phones and no food. So that's when the AT&T cell phone towers went down, and we had to go to Lafayette to get Verizon and T-Mobile. The only guy with us, he had like a Cricket or a T-Mobile phone worked. All of us had AT&T and Verizon, and nothing worked, but his did. But yeah, you're right. I think you bring up a great point. If you're going to come for a mission, find groups. There's plenty up there. What do you say, Normie Pro? Find people out there and come with a purpose and help. And and don't gouge. Gas stations, they get in trouble if they gouge. Come here and really help. I mean, really help. And there's nothing wrong with making a living, but you've got to open up your heart too.
Gavin talks about that a lot with getting paid and stuff, working on these disaster sites, and that comes afterwards. And there's a way to do that, and you have to do it the right way. However, that shouldn't be the focus up front. And you don't want to go into those areas, and I use the term uninvited, and maybe that's not correct, but without the proper training, equipment, and everything else, because then you fall into two categories, a victim or a survivor. And they don't need any more of those in those areas. They need helpers. Not more to the problem. So, Gavin, what do you got on this as far as some of the stuff that happens from the exposure as we go forward a day or 2 or 6 out?
Well, I think you and I have had a couple of phone calls already today, Lance. I had a bad day in the office. And I had probably 3 meetings here in Washington, D.C. with different government agencies and entities trying to promote our profession as professionals. And I went downtown today, my first meeting over at Homeland Security with the IRCRC standards all in my little backpack, ready to go. And I showed them at the first meeting and they went, "What's that?" And I said, "These are the standards that the people I represent, they cling to. They cling to a standard. They know their work. They're so professional. They can tell you exactly what they do based on science, based on measurements." And Homeland Security went, "Who's IRCRC? Never heard of them. And what's those documents you've got? Standards? You guys have standards?" "Yes, we have standards, and we professionally train these people to those standards." And I was like, "Gavin, you just failed." I walked away from that meeting feeling so demoralized. It was like, really? I couldn't get through to the government. So they went to my next meeting talking about the same thing, because we were talking about the response in the effect of Hurricane Helene, how long that's going to take. It's going to be not months, but years. The role that all of our professionals, everyone that's on this call, the role you're going to play in recovery. Gave a great speech there. Didn't end too well. Again, who are you again, and what do you represent? And the last meeting was exactly the same. So going back to what Doug said, okay, Florida has licensing in place for what we do. We have to be better at explaining what licensing means, and the fact that the way that we protect, and I'm talking buildings here tonight. The talk that I gave today, Lance, was about critical infrastructure protection, CIP. Those buildings in a community that are essential for everyday, life in those communities. So we're talking about the banks, we're talking about the schools, we're talking about the airports, we're talking about the government offices, we're talking about the hotels, all that stuff that falls under critical infrastructure protection. We're not even talking yet about people's homes and private residences. We're talking about when you get a storm surge or an event like this, where there's a lot of flooding, a lot of water damage, how do you then protect and then recover critical infrastructure? And that's where I thought I thought that was going to be the big golden ticket for us to get a better seat at the table, going, "Yep, we need you guys here." And they're going, "Wow, you got standards, you do training. What's all this about? Licensing? What's that about?" So it means I've got to come back now and talk to Doug, Lance, and Mason, and go, "Guys, I need the elevator pitch. I need another way to get out there and promote what we do," because if you look at historically, Lance, we've all, I teach at Penn State. I teach 3 graduate courses in emergency management and disaster response. And I've been doing that for about 14 years. We've gone to many big events, big disasters. And it's so important that we now use this event to focus on developing that network, like Mason said, that network of connections to actually say, I know where Mason is today. I know where someone else is today. I know where else, and I know that they're working and they're going to need resupply of critical supplies pretty soon. They're going to run out of PPE. Oh, I wonder, did they get any water and food last night? How far are they driving to the nearest shelter? Are they part of the disaster recovery team? That's where we want to go with this. And I think, what we've been talking amongst you and Doug and many others now is how do we form that collaboration? But more importantly, how do we get that network going to say, we are professional. We're the guys that know how to do this. We're the people that know how to do this because we're trained to do that. And those standards are meaningful. Because at the moment, I walked away today when those IRCRC standards had no meaning, no value whatsoever in the meeting I was at right now on October the 8th. And I think that's something we've got to fix.
That's a very valuable point, Gavin. I think we forget sometimes how much we know compared to what even the first responders know. I remember when the Baton Rouge flood happened here, and I went to Baton Rouge. I was doing a free seminar, and I talked about Cat 3 water. And I remember the FEMA rep coming up to me and saying, "You said Cat 3, what is that?" And I said, "Well, we're not concerned about mold because the water came and the water left. What I'm concerned about is the microbials, and that's Cat 3 water." And he said, "Really, what is that?" And I said, "Well, remember those caskets floating down Main Street and Denham Springs? Yeah, that's Cat 3. We're talking about microbials. That's what we're talking about." And I think it's just amazing that we forget sometimes how much we know about this, and we need opportunity to be able to share it.
Gavin, that's actually the piece that's missing. You have the government entity that has the power for decision-making, spending, things like that. And then you have the people that actually know the industry, but the communications between them doesn't exist. Whether it's political reasons, monetary, whatever it is, that's the barrier we need to break through. And truthfully, reason is really the only way that we can approach that. I was curious though, the meetings that you were at, were they the main players or were they like the typical, well, the main players were busy, so they sent somebody else to sit in the chair and they wouldn't have any idea? Because I've experienced that numerous times.
It's not often, Lance, I get to rub shoulders with a couple of generals I've never met and a couple of congressmen and senators that are there probably when they should be off campaigning for the election. They are all back in town. Yeah, the first meeting was a high-level meeting, which, again, I appreciate the opportunity to, again, represent our industry, talk about the skills, the knowledge, the skills, the abilities, and the professionalism, and even just talking about the science of drying. That's what I was really talking about, and the need to do that in critical infrastructure. I was really focused on critical infrastructure. So I got my piece in, but then from the questions I received, and then the coffee break, and of course you have the discussion after, I went, oh, I'm not there, am I? I haven't got you convinced, and I can understand. I know, Doug, probably one of the kindest guys I've ever met. We do this because we love what we do, but it's still a business. And in the end, I've got to feed my family as well as Mason's got to feed his, and Doug's got to support all those grandkids that he's got. But it's important that we want to, in an ideal world, if I could go and do what I do, for, without worrying about the money, I'd do that, but I can't. And when I use consumables, when I move people, when I use gas in the cars, when I have to pay for hotels, when I've got a team in the field that I've got to look after their health and safety, that costs money. And that's where we have to then justify that we do have a seat at the table. We are part of recovery and we do it the right way. And the discussion I had with Doug just recently was, what would be our response if a certain state said, we aren't going to require licensing? And that made my blood boil. And I thought, hang on, wait a minute, I've got to come back with a better response than that. What would be the professional way to say you're doing it the wrong way?
Well, again, somebody has to, quote, be in charge. you know, unfortunately, the people that are in charge aren't the ones that are educated in what needs to be done. So that's where we have to team up with them. I want to go back to a quick point that Mason said earlier, though, about not having cell phones and having to use regular maps. If you can find a map, there's not many places that you can actually get maps any longer. But we actually activated something today that you're going back old school, ham radio. I was running and monitoring a ham channel down in Naples for about 5 hours today. You know, now Naples still had internet service. They're outside of where the problem was, but their reach wirelessly is big into these disaster areas. There is communications that is possible. So thinking outside the box, there's other things that we can do. And I think that's what we have to do outside the box, to talk to these officials and say, hey, let's do it, but do it the right way.
Well, and I think what Dr. Gavin was saying about, you know, there are very few of us that are literally following the science. And when we talk about trained professionals who are certified by a state that actually requires it, that's a huge amount of credibility that we need to be able to share with those guys that are in decision-making positions.
Yeah, and Sohan and Mo have made those comments in the chat here too, Doug, and I totally agree with them that there was representatives, a CEO and a vice president of operations from an airport. You can guess which one it was, and they've had some water events before. There's some water damage, and the VP of the operation went, "Oh, and we always go with the cheapest bid." And I went, "What?" Good, because I'm coming into your airport. I'm going to bring in my tools. I'm going to take measurements over the next couple of weeks and the next couple of months, and I'm going to show you how unsafe and unhealthy it is based on the measurements that I can measure. Where I can measure air, I can measure surfaces, I can measure water, and I can give you real metrics based on science. Well, why would you want to do that? Because I want to make sure the job's done properly, and what I mean by that, it's done focused on health and safety. Oh, well, no one's ever told us that before. And I went, oh, you're in Florida. You've got to be kidding me.
Hey, Gavin, I'm sure you've seen it, the movie Space Cowboys.
Yes.
Well, there's a line in that movie about what are our chances, and I don't remember the exact line, but the idea was, he says, well, we have a rocket with 100,000 different parts made by people all over the world, lowest bid sitting on top of 1 million pounds of liquid oxygen. What could go wrong?
I love that. Hey, so I got a question for you, Dr. Gavin, and everyone. So we think of the disaster and the people that are stranded, the animals and everything, right? It's terrible. Well, one came across to me yesterday, and I can't stop thinking about it. The assisted living, they can't move all the people out. I mean, think about that. I mean, what's the procedures to dry out that place and keep it safe, you know, and let alone if the storm hits the building, we didn't move them. And honestly, how do you move them? How do you move 900 patients or 500 patients? Dr. Gavin, have you guys ever thought of that?
Yeah,
I mean,
I've been involved in that, Mason, and I want to be really clear with everyone. What I do and what I teach and what I train and how I operationalize, it's based on equity. Everyone is equal, and I've had some real challenges. I know when Sandy hit New York City, and I was involved in the evacuation or the moving patients from hospitals, those 7 hospitals that we moved patients from, and some of the barometric or the much larger patients, we didn't have means of doing that. And then we talked about, oh gosh, there's equipment in London, in the UK. If we get that special barometric bed that can lift that 300-pound person, then we can evacuate them. And I said, why are we even having this discussion? Just get the bed. Because that person is not, with no electricity in that hospital, we've got to get them out. Now, when you go back to the community, and especially Florida, with the demographics of the age, the assisted living, but more importantly, the retirees down there, there's a lot of people that are not capable of doing things that we expect them to do on the TV. And that assistance is lacking. Now, if they're staying in place, what are they doing on Friday? And as you've probably seen yourself, Mason, areas in North Carolina, Tennessee, and even Georgia now, you've got to take your own water. The water is not safe to drink. You can't flush the toilet because the waste management system's not functioning. The sanitation's not functioning. You've got to focus on if you're deploying right now, and I'm talking to everyone on this call, if you're deploying right now, you have to be trained for deployment. You have to be responsible for health and hygiene. You've got to go in there and say, how much food have I got? How much water have I got? And how long can I stay before I need help? Because I've been involved, Mason, in a number of disasters where we've all deployed and then suddenly the responders, I've had to go rescue them.
Yeah,
You know,
Yeah.
one of the things I was going to say, Mason, is I think you really nailed something that we forget about. Nobody's talked about Sun City, southeast of Tampa, and you're talking about a whole community of elderly people basically on the water, Ruskin, right there, 2 miles from the water. How are they going to fare, and who's taking care of them?
One of the things that we're skipping over here with, and you mentioned the elderly like that. I was involved with evacuating a nursing home during a major flood with Hurricane Floyd, and we were taking elderly people out that really had no understanding of what was going on. So we were dealing with panic. We were dealing with people that we were making their health conditions worse just by trying to move them out of the water. And, you need training for that. You can't just send people in to grab and run. It's another level of training. And then you need a place to go. That was one of the things that we ran into, Gavin. Where do you put the patients, after you take them out of the environment that's keeping them safe and healthier?
Really, really good question, Lance. In the medical world, the hospital world, we practice, we train, we drill.
Right.
And so we have exercises. What I'd like to suggest to our community, our network, is that we start, again, replicating, copying what there's. Let's start exercising. Let's start practicing. Let's start drilling. Let's start doing real world scenarios where we either as a tabletop exercise or as a functional, as a full scale drill, we can even do that. But let's get the right people within our within our network, within our industry together and actually train, rehearse, practice so that we understand how to address some of these needs. Because you're absolutely right, Lance. On Friday, they are going to be real world issues. And I would feel much better if I could say, well, 3 months ago, we as an industry did a tabletop exercise, and here are the challenges. These are the things that we thought we were going to face, and here are some of the solutions, and then apply them on Friday after Hurricane Milton's gone.
Mason, when you just got back from, you were in North Carolina, I believe you said. What are some of the estimates out there on power outages? How long are these people looking at? And you mentioned like 4 or 5 days from now for one area, but the more rural areas.
They have no, and it's amazing on the power. Let me first touch on Dr. Gavin. I love what you said. Practice before the tabletop. I can't believe this thing means really powerful for me. My son plays baseball. My son plays tennis. We've all done sports and stuff, and you practice, right? I mean, a baseball player will hit off the tee. So I love to talk about that. I think that's incredible. On your power thing, there is no timeline in the hills. There's towns with nothing, and they're not going to get power anytime soon. In Augusta, they said October 12th. They started getting power in half the city 2 days ago. But in the hills, there is no timeline. And everyone has tailgate meetings and all those things. So all the hotels I go, I see lines and lines of trucks. And it's a jigsaw puzzle to get all those line trucks out, right? And they have meetings and they have to do them, OSHA and meet their standards and keep safe, because we don't want them to get hurt either. So no, there is no timeline up in the hills. They didn't give us any. I was there for 4 or 5 days before I saw the first military truck go up there.
I was gonna ask you about that. What did you see as far as security and protection for the workers?
And none.
That's something that you need to consider when you're going into those areas.
Yeah, there was none up in the hills in the Carolinas. Up there was nothing. Typically in Lake Charles, when the hurricane happened, any place that had guns, Dick's Sporting Good or anything like that, the National Guards came in, and we were sucking up a building. And all of a sudden, I saw these Humvees and military with guns coming out. I was like, hey, I'm not breaking in this building. I'm sucking it out. And they're like, no, we're here because there's guns in the pawn shop or in the sporting goods store, in the Walmart or whatever store sell guns. Yeah, so you're right. There was no security. And honestly, no one could get up there. And then they have a curfew line. So it takes you 2-3 hours to get in the hill. And then it takes you 2-3 hours to get down with no lights and no power and bad roads around trees. And then they curfew 6 or 7. So it is devastation. In New Orleans, we had a lot of court buildings we did right on the water down there. And we had to be out by 5-6 o'clock, so curfew, everything. I like how you said that. And I don't know if invite or that is the right word, like you said, but you need to come with a purpose and understand that there's so much I'm still learning. I just got some new mock boots and stuff like that. There's so much. Most of these buildings have sand and debris, and it's more than just sucking up water. So you kind of have to understand that, like the hotels, the food, the lights, 2.5 hours. So someone might work 8 hours and be on empty and they're not getting out. We had one guy in Orange Beach 2 years ago during that hurricane came up. One of the buildings we went on, they put a pretty roof with river rocks. Well, the hurricane took the river rocks and built up all the penthouses. So there's just stuff you're always learning. I think people really need to touch base. I really love what you guys are doing here at Normie. And Dr. Gavin, you guys talking about moving the seniors, when they have dementia and all that, they don't know what's going on. That's another panic. There's my big thing I saw in Louisiana, broke my heart, is how many people lost power, their fridge with no food, and they also had no air and oxygen, right? I saw other people bring in their oxygen tanks to help the neighbor. And it was just, Louisiana really touches your heart, that what they did down there. And trucks coming in to Houston not long ago, Harvey, and I saw people with boats and everything just bringing waters down the road. So there is a lot of great people and they want to help, but they kind of need to know a system, pair up with a church or something out there.
Doug, correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't there a situation with Katrina where the local police department took over, I believe it was the Walmart, and actually staged out of there?
Yeah,
They were able to function?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Of course, what was interesting here, I live on the North Shore away from New Orleans, so I'm considered kind of in the country. And of course, we didn't get power here for 3 weeks, and I think internet for 5. But what was interesting to me was how many people were there to help immediately, providing water, places to sleep, food, and so forth. And then, as you suggested, there were several areas that they actually took over as their staging area on the North Shore and in New Orleans area, where they could actually take care of the people who needed it. So, yeah, there was a great response in Katrina. And I think what's interesting is that it wasn't nearly as organized as I think it's been today. I think Mason would say that and Dr. Gavin would say that, is that we've learned so much since 2005 about coordinating these efforts, even just the simple things like being able to communicate to one another. Back then, it wasn't quite so easy.
There's a comment in the chat from Mo. There's a multitude of software with maps that can be utilized with no connectivity. He's absolutely right. But who has thought of that prior to these events? And that's the whole tabletop concept. If there's no reason to be without your internet and all your fancy tools, why are you going to look for, the paper and pencil? But you need to know how to use it.
I love what you said. I went to Love's Truck Stop to get a Garmin. You know how hard it was for me to buy a $500 to $700 Garmin when it's on my phone for free? But when you're driving up the hills and it tells you to turn here and it's a cliff, let me tell you, it's the best investment I ever spent. Yeah. It was hard.
Yeah. Well, as far as going forward, I mean, I know we have a lot of people who have gotten some calls, they're saying, hey, what can we do? Can we go to these areas? I don't have an answer for you for that because, first of all, the hurricane hasn't hit yet. The previous one does, but we don't know what the conditions are going to be where the previous hurricane went through after this one passes through. It's not going to make it better. Let's start with that. It's going to be worse. And this hurricane is also strengthened today. It weakened earlier, but it's strengthened again. It's moving further south. So all of their predictions and people getting ready that we're going to ride it out are now closer to being in, direct hit. So, people have to prepare for this. And the old mentality is, I've been through hurricanes before. I was listening to some of the news stations and they all said the same thing. Nobody's been through one like this. This is something that hasn't happened in over 100 years in this area. There's no one really alive that's experienced this to say, I've been through hurricanes, I'm okay. So, you know, no matter how much you know and you think you know, there's always a lot of the unknowns. So,
Hey, so I got a question for you, and I've heard this, and tell me if I'm right, that if the swell comes up to like 12 feet, that could go in like 18 miles, right? Because Florida's pretty flat out there.
yeah, well, they were talking about Tampa and they were talking about a 10 to 15-foot swell. And then they said 90% of the Tampa Bay area is only 9 to 10 feet above sea level or less. It's like we talk about with mold and microbes. They don't stop at the door, because you remediated one room. They just keep rolling. When Hurricane Sandy came through in New Jersey, that was one of the big things that they made a very large mistake with. They had all the floodplain maps and everything else that were drawn out, but 20 years later, after the maps were made, there's all kinds of buildings and roads and all kinds of changes that they didn't account for. So it was completely different from all their planning. So there's things like that. You can't just rely on somebody saying, well, you're not in a floodplain, you're good. Down there, my brother-in-law was down there, he checked. I think he said he was about 30 feet above sea level. He's inland, probably about 20, 30 miles from the coast. And that's pretty high up for Florida. For me, yeah, I'm not worried about that. I'm 49 meters above sea level. If water gets to me, there's a whole lot of other problems.
Yeah.
But those are things that change. And a lot of times the government, people we're relying on, they're not keeping up with this for cost, for apathy, for whatever.
So one thing, I have a question for you guys. A lot of my friends that do travel and do storm chasing and all this, well, they come from different areas. Maybe Dr. Gavin could touch on this too. When in Arizona, the humidity and the drying and the mold and the microbial is going to be different than Florida, right? And New Orleans, just like Alaska is going to be different than Australia. I mean, is there ways for these guys to start learning that? Because it's...
Yeah, absolutely. I'll let Dr. Gavin answer your question for sure. But one of the things, being raised in the South, which I was, and living in a wet, humid environment, you can't just open the windows and expect to dry the house with 70% humidity outside. And usually it's higher than that. I think right after Katrina, it was like 85% humidity for weeks. And so, yeah, the drying process and just what we said earlier about following the science in terms of the drying process is so, so important.
Mason, to your point, before Gavin answers the question, when Hurricane Sandy came through, a lot of contractors from the South came up to help out the New York, New Jersey metro area. And they're rebuilding roofs and things like that. And the question came up about, are you using ice shielding? They're looking at us like, what are you talking about? What is that? Ice shielding is something you put on the roofs 3, 4, 6 feet up from the gutters to prevent the ice damming. And there's a whole bunch of stuff, but they're rebuilding houses, not knowing about the science required for different climates, to your point. And that's a problem with people not being trained and going into these different areas. Gavin, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, this is important, Lance. There are areas that we have to focus on as a profession. There's areas that we have to focus on the science of drying and what we do in remediation and restoration. We have to get that message out there. My experience today in Washington, D.C., I've got some big gaps to fill, but I know we can do that. I'm pretty confident. But there's the other thing that both Mason's raised and Mo has raised in the chat as well, is that being ready for deployment. Are you up to date on your vaccinations? Now, when I ask people in the profession, did you have your vaccinations? They're going, yeah, we got tetanus. I went, what else? Well, what else is there? Well, did you get diphtheria? Did you get cholera? Did you get typhoid, hepatitis B, meningitis? There's other vaccines I'd like to see you have before you deploy to an environment that has very limited resources or has such disruption like Mason just talked about. Everyone who deploys, do you have two tourniquets on you? Because you're going to be dealing with a lot of sharp edges. You're going to be dealing with damaged buildings. The likelihood of getting cut It's going to happen.
And
Now,
there's no 911.
no, you need to know how to
Yeah.
put a tourniquet on. Now, if I'm in the field, I've got my stitch kit and I'll throw in a few stitches in there. I'm not the best at doing that, but it's not going to make you look pretty, but I'm going to save your life. You don't need to go as far as that, but I can do that for you. But more importantly, have a few bandages, have a couple of tourniquets. Have you done a course on how to apply the tourniquet, how to use the tourniquet? Yeah, these are critical. And the other thing, Lance, is have a means of boiling water. If you want to make friends and influence people when you go on deployment, you boil water. Because if you boil water, you can make coffee. If you boil water, you can throw ramen noodles in there and make a meal. If you boil water, there's so many things you can do. The other guy. So when we lose power here in Washington, D.C. in a storm, I'm out there in the front yard, sitting here. I've got some of the smartest people in the world in my street. I'm boiling water. What are they doing? I'm making coffee because you guys can't. And so it's really important you have some of those life skills there that are ready for deployment. And I think that's the area that Doug and I have been talking about, trying to help everyone. We'll put some ideas in some courses, a quick training course and a deployment checklist together so people can do that. But simple things will make you look like a superstar.
Absolutely. And again, that comes down to, we talked about tabletop. You and I have talked about that a lot. Like, especially when we did the course on the ICS or the NIMS 700, getting people familiar with how FEMA and emergency management operates. You need to know the rules, basically, if you're going to function there.
And learn to speak their language.
Yes.
Learn to be able to go into the emergency operations center and talk to the incident commander or talk to operations and talk in a way that they go, oh, that's what you do. I get it. All your stuff's over there. Call in at 5 o'clock and let us know what's going on and be part of that team.
The funny part is that we talk about that with our industry. We have our own language or terminology, initials for everything. It means something to us. You deal with a government entity or somebody from a different vertical, they don't know what you're talking about. And you think you do. And that's when people get hurt.
Another side of this too, guys, we haven't really talked a lot about, but I think is really important with our mission from Normie is to educate the public. We have a couple of documents on our ETF that helps them know how to deal with the issues and help the residents and the volunteers. But I was talking with someone yesterday in the Tampa Bay area that they decided they're not going to evacuate. And I said, well, do you have a gas grill in case you need something to cook? No. Do you have a generator? No. You know that there is the possibility that you'll lose power for weeks. Have you filled up the tub with water? I mean, there's so many basic things that I think we could help even the public understand that would make life easier for them.
It's a good point. Yeah. Mel's just raised this question here. Mel's been a professional firefighter for the last 22 years. Yep, I get it, Mel. At the local level, things can be loosely coordinated. But if I'm the incident commander, and I have been an incident commander on a number of disasters, and I say, who can do swift water rescue? You can. I'm not going to check their guy. If they say they can, off you go. Go and rescue people. Who the mayor's office has just had 3 feet of water through it. The mayor wants to get back in the office as soon as possible. Who can go and dry that space? That might be the loose coordination talking about. But if I'm the incident commander at a local level, like after a Hurricane Helene or Milton, I'm looking for those people. What I think Doug, Lance, and I are trying to discuss here is how do we get you onto that list? How do we tell the story very precisely and succinctly of how you do it based on science? And how do we get that message out to key decision makers? And again, going back to my bad day in the office today, I found that the guys here in DC had not received that message. So now I've got to put my thoughts together going, how can I do better? And what Doug just said is exactly right. We need to be able to show our story, tell our story, whether it be through video or case studies or whatever. We're still working on that, but it's something that we desperately need to do.
One of the things that we just started is something we call Project Safe, which is on the Environmental Task Force page. And what that really is we're going to be sending out a text notification to people after the storms have gone through. And it's a way for them to check in and say that they're okay. I think the term that we use is IMOC, I-M-O-K. I'm okay. That's the response basically that you would text back. We can get that. And the reason for us knowing is somebody may call, Mesa may say, hey, I need, 6 people or a crew that works in this area. I look, say, hey, these guys are reported in, they're okay. We can get them to you, or we can put you in touch with them. So it's really a coordination of information that we're trying to do. I would recommend everybody, I'm going to put an address in the room here real quick. It's normiepro.org/safe. It takes you right to the page. You can get on our text notification list for that. There's some other cool information there about how it functions. And it's just another layer that we're trying to keep in play as communications and coordination.
That's really critical, Lance, because I wanted to offer to everyone on this call today here and anyone who watches this video, if you're getting involved in recovery efforts, and there's a lot going on, as Mason's just clearly outlined, there's a lot going on. If you get involved and you need a credibility check, you need someone to say, to vouch for you, then I'll share you my cell phone number, call me and I'll beef it up and I'll say, yeah, based on your credentials, you can do that job. I'm sure Doug and Lance, yourself, we'll help you out. But that's the Band-Aid short-term fix. We have a bigger goal on getting everyone on a list and making them credible. We're not there yet, but if right now, if you find yourself in a situation where local authorities are not believing you can do what you do, then reach out to us and we will jump on the phone or whatever it takes to vouch for you and to say you're credible and you're trained and you're certified.
Hey, Mason, you have any kind of last words? We're getting near the top. Yeah, we don't have to go, but I don't want to hold anybody longer than they need to be here. So anything you want to get out and let people know?
No, I just think, I'm 54 now. And when I was 20, I would, 16, I got my license. I was so excited. I ran to the store and got milk, came home, ran to the store and got the dry cleaning, right? Ran and went to Blockbuster or something. And now what you guys really talk about is putting systems in place, keeping people safe and analyze it. Like I talked about those linemen and they had those safety tailgate meetings. It's so important to be patient. If you see someone drowning, don't just jump in and drown too. Maybe find a rope or find someone to help you. I think what you guys are doing is credible. I'm learning a lot more. And like I said, I've been in the business since 94, so 30 plus years, actually 30 plus because it was March. And it's just amazing what's out there. And technology has helped us and hinder us, and people have changed. But I've never really thought about moving the assisted living until today, because it's not just moving people in an ambulance. It's also their medical and their care and where are they going to sleep and what do they need. So I'm with you guys. I'm blown away. I'm really, really worried about this one. I'm telling you, this one's worried for me.
And just a quick correction, Lance. I know you meant well, but I think that website is normieproetf.org.
Oh, would I type it wrong? Yeah, it could be. I was talking while I was typing. Sorry about that.
I just put it in there. normieproetf.org.
And if I can just add one last thing, Lance, too, that Sohan has mentioned in the chat kindness and empathy. Tom Martin has talked about children. If in all the disasters, all the emergencies that I've gone to, as well as the training I do now, if there's one big gap in everything we do, it's how to deal with children. And if you're in that situation, whether it be in Florida, North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, and you are dealing with children, the best advice I can give you is be kind. They are confused, they are traumatized, they don't understand the situation. When you are trying to do the work you're doing or you're dealing with a community or a situation, kindness is the answer for children, because we lack training on how to deal with kids in emergencies and disasters. We really
their medical needs are completely different also, even more so than the elderly, because their bodies haven't developed the defenses they need, especially with Cat3 water and things like that. The blood-brain barrier, I think it's 7-year-old. Anybody younger doesn't have the protection. I mean, there's all kinds of things like that people don't know about or think about. And you can't just treat a kid like you treat an adult. Completely different.
And trying to explain, Lance, that the building is unsafe after it suffered significant water damage is really hard for a kid to understand.
So, Dr. Gavin, I got one for you. Fires in California. We had a really bad fire, and Becky was a little girl at the time. And the fires were right up to our house, and the smoke and all that, and no one could go up the hill. And she called me and she's like, hey, Dad, I put all the stuff that I wanted on my bed. you know, and no one could get up the hill. So you have to do the right thing and explain to them that, you know, they're young, 6 years old, you know, 5 years old, and you have to explain to them, hey, you know, that can be replaced. But I have a friend that's in Tampa, and he said, hey, Mason, should I stay or should I go? And I go, you're a grown adult, but you're the protector. Your wife and kids, you should let them go. What are you out? A few days of work, a hotel. If you need something, I'll Venmo you. I go, that's minor. When it comes to kids, I think you get them out of harm ways, right? And we're protectors.
And it's a really good point, Mason. So much emphasis, or we see on TV, in the internet, the media at the moment, is on this category, which is based on the wind speed. That's not our business is water damage. And there is, you know, we saw this significant surge rainfall. That's the emphasis that should be made now. You're going to get a significant storm surge. It's going to be above my head. We're going to see significant rainfall. That's why you get out. You know, we've got it all backwards. You know, we focus on this wind. If your house is built to code, in, you know, what was it? But since 2006 or thereabouts, Doug, I think all those buildings had.
Yeah, that's right.
Hurricane Ian showed us. Hurricane Ian demonstrated those houses were still standing at the end of the day. The houses that were built before 2006 did not be up to code. They're gone. And so it's so critical now that we focus on what are the real risks, and what are the and risk. We use risk as defined by likelihood and consequence. Likelihood, this is going to be a significant water event, and that water is going to lead to drowning, water damage to buildings. It's going to lead to toxic water, contaminated water, and that's the key here right now. And I was saying this to Lance today. I think we were both watching the same television this afternoon for an update, and we went, the message is not coming across.
You know, what's interesting about that, Dr. Gavin, is the big issue after Katrina was what? It was the levees breaking. A lot of the big issues that they're dealing with in North Carolina was what? The dams breaking. So, you know, there's a tremendous, I think you're exactly right. It's not only the storm surge, but the just tremendous amount of water. And of course, I was raised in Tampa, so I know that the water goes away quickly with the sand. But when you're overwhelmed, I also remember how quickly the roads filled up with water. And so, yeah, you're exactly right. It's not just about the wind.
And when I went down to Fort Myers and Naples after Hurricane Ian, it was a couple of weeks afterwards, Doug, the number of skin infections. People had skin infections. Well, we've always seen skin infections after hurricanes. It's a known. This is a known thing. This happens. You get that water there is contaminated. It's toxic. You're going to get skin infections. And we go, oh, I didn't know we were going to get all these skin infections. Yeah, yes, you did. And then we had no way of treating those skin infections. So therefore, people trying to do recovery work were now being, affected, impacted by skin infections. You're going to get that, guys. And so when you deploy, you need to take something in your kit that addresses those skin infections.
Well, we are at the top of the hour. I know Mason has some serious traveling ahead of him in his very near future. I think glutton for punishment is a term, right? You just got home and you're heading back out again. So I applaud you for that. Just take care of you.
Right. Well, thank
you. You don't become part of the problem.
Yeah, that's the truth. Yeah. I'll stay on the weak side. I'm gonna go in after the storm hits, but I'm gonna get over to Pensacola area, Tallahassee, and then go down there.
No, very, very proud of what you do, Mason. And again, we're all about building a team and building many more Masons so we can actually do this more professionally. But very proud of what you do, mate. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Mason. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. And I want to thank everybody that's been here tonight. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us. Any of you that are in, I'll say, harm's way, please be careful. Please listen to, the evacuation orders if you still can evacuate. And those of you on the East Coast of Florida, you're not out of the woods because you're on the East Coast. This is still going to be a hurricane coming across. So please be careful and don't get complacent.
I would say too, Lance, anyone on here that is going to deploy like Mason is just drop us a line so we know where you are. It always helps to let us know that you've deployed, and then we can keep tabs to make sure you're safe.
I'm going to bring that website up real quick just to show everybody where they can get on the text list. So give me 1 second to share my screen.
You know, Dr. Gavin?
Yep.
Hey, I had a weird one. One of my friends' kids play football, and they all share that big old water thing in the thing, and they're all getting strep throat. They have a water fill station out there, so they all get drinks. Is that crazy?
No, it happens.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it.
And Mason, it's preventable.
Yes.
Just want to point out real quick, if you go to the Environmental Task Force page, and I'll start with the homepage here, normieproetf.com or .org, either one will get you there. There's a lot of information on this site for you, but what I'm talking about is under Project Safe up here in the upper right corner. Again, more information here explains what we're doing, but to join the text notification list, this is our main number at Normie, 877-251-2296. Just send a text to that number, and in the message, just type in join space safe, and you'll be immediately added to the list. You get a text notification that you've been involved, and it's all about staying in contact.
Yeah, well done, Lance. That's a fantastic initiative. I'm really impressed by that.
All right, well, thank you all very much. We're going to stop the recording on this now. If anybody wants to hang out and still chat, you're more than welcome to. I don't want to chase anybody away, but I'm trying to respect Mason's time here because he's got a long way to go. So just remind everybody that in 2 weeks, or about 2 weeks, the 4th Tuesday of the month, we'll be doing another training here, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, for Normie recertification credits. And don't forget to log your CEUs for tonight. Stand by, everybody.